As the preceding parts of this course make clear, the presidency of George W. Bush was subjected to a sophisticated, multifaceted, and aggressive Islamist influence operation whose considerable success owed much to its enabler, Grover Norquist. Hard as it may be to believe, the degree of penetration of the U.S. government by Muslim Brotherhood and like-minded operatives and the extent of their influence is even worse in the Barack Obama administration. That's due in part, at least, to the precedents and personnel practices established under its predecessor. In part, it's a reflection of the predilections of Team Obama, starting with those of the president himself. The next two parts of this course consider the state of the Muslim Brotherhood's civilization jihad against America during the Obama years. First, we'll focus on illustrative examples of Brotherhood-associated individuals who've been allowed to have access to, and in some cases actually been given positions in, the Obama administration. Then, in Part 9, we'll consider the significant and ominous effects on official policy that have been achieved under President Barack Obama by such individuals and their allies.
The Obama administration has built on President Bush's practice of entrusting positions of influence, sometimes including key government posts, to individuals tied to the Muslim Brotherhood and/or other Islamist organizations. For the present purpose, an examination of 6 such individuals will suffice. Taken together with other officials who are clearly sympathetic to the Islamists' priorities, including Mr. Obama himself, the danger posed by these operators' penetration of the government is acute. Mr. Obama has proudly described Rashad Hussain as a, quote, Hafiz of the Quran, unquote, and therefore, quote, a respected member of the American Muslim community, unquote. Such individuals have committed to memory the Quran in its entirety and enjoy an honored status among Sharia-adherent Muslims as their feat is an indicator of one's devotion to Allah. Hussain has long been involved with various Muslim Brotherhood Front organizations, including Abdurrahman Alamudi's American Muslim Council, the International Institute of Islamic Thought, or IIIT, to which jihadists like Sami al-Arian and Jamal Barzinji also have ties. Hussain was also involved with the original Muslim Brotherhood Front, the Muslim Students Association. An example of Hussain's sympathies can be found in his public declaration at a Muslim Students Association conference in Chicago in September 2004 that Sami al-Arian had been subjected to a, quote, politically motivated prosecution, unquote. Some accounts indicate that he actually said persecution. In January 2009, Hussain was named Deputy Associate White House Counsel. According to his Wikipedia profile, among Hussain's responsibilities in that capacity have been national security and new media issues, quote, helping inform the administration's Muslim outreach efforts, unquote. Hussain has also been credited with consulting on the drafting of the president's first address to the, quote, Muslim world, unquote, delivered in June 2009 at Al-Azhar University in Cairo. On February 20th, 2010, President Obama announced that Rashid Hussain, Hafiz of the Quran, would serve as, quote, my special envoy, unquote, to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Even more than his White House job, Hussein's new post has proven to be a platform for facilitating official outreach to all the wrong sorts of Muslims and for promoting their agendas. For example, in a speech on July 20th, 2010, Rashad Hussain credited the president's Cairo address for having created a new framework for relating to Muslims, as he called it, quote, a framework that recognizes we cannot engage 1/4 of the world's population based on the beliefs of just a fringe few, and that our engagement can't be limited to an issue like violent extremism, but that it must be much broader than that, unquote. This statement is a classic influence operation. It misrepresents as the, quote, beliefs of a fringe few, unquote, what are, in fact, the teachings and practice of mainstream Islam's Sharia doctrine. It characterizes as, quote, violent extremism, unquote, what is actually jihad. And it insists that the United States must, quote, engage, unquote, with those who are perpetrating jihadism, or at least supporting it, despite such conduct. Rashad Hussain has also lent the prestige of his office to Muslim Brotherhood-mounted interfaith dialogue initiatives. For example, he participated in the August 2010 bridge-building trip Suhail Khan arranged for, among others, 8 Islamists, and U.S. Special Envoy to Monitor and Combat Anti-Semitism, Hannah Rosenthal. Speaking of bridges, Hussain has been among those in the Obama administration encouraging efforts to bridge the differences between the U.S. Constitution's guarantee of freedom of expression and the OIC's efforts to prohibit and criminalize worldwide expression that, quote, defames, unquote, Islam. Sayyid Qutb's description of a one-way bridge for bringing the infidel to Islam comes to mind. We will have more to say about the latest developments in this policy initiative in Part 9. Another prominent Obama appointee is Huma Abedin. She's described as a, quote, devout Muslim, unquote, who grew up in Saudi Arabia, born of parents who hail from what is now Pakistan. Her late father, Sayyid Zainul Abidin, clearly fit the profile of an Islamist. He is described as an Islamic scholar, but if he worked for 15 years in Saudi Arabia, it's a safe bet he was a Sharia adherent one. He also specialized in what is, as we have seen, a priority for the Brotherhood's stealth jihadists, quote, interfaith understanding and reconciliation, unquote, and promoting Muslim minorities in the West. Another clue about Sayyid Abedin's proclivities: he was a counselor in the 1990s to the Muslim World League, a vehicle the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and wealthy Saudis have long used to underwrite Islamist proselytization and other operations around the globe. To calibrate the implications of such a tie to the World League, consider this. An Abedin family friend, who is said to have sponsored the Abedins after they moved to Saudi Arabia in 1977, and perhaps was responsible for getting them to make that move in the first place, was Abdullah Omar Nassif, the Secretary General of the Muslim World League. In that capacity, he wrote in 1989 that, quote, the secular worldview is the total negation of the Islamic faith, unquote. Therefore, he added, quote, the struggle of Islamic thought with modern secularism is part of the eternal warfare of Islam against kufr, against the powers of atheism, lie, and evil, unquote. Huma Abedin's mother is carrying on her late husband's work. She is the founder and vice dean of Dar al-Hikmah College in Jeddah, the director of an institute in London, and editor of its journal devoted to Muslim minorities living outside the Dar al-Islam, namely in the Dar al-Harb, or House of War. In addition, Salah Abedin is listed by the International Committee for the Peace Council, along with the likes of the Dalai Lama and Bishop Desmond Tutu, as one of the, quote, international peace counselors, unquote, who have earned, quote, the respect of their faith communities for how they live and what they do. Arab press outlets, including Aliwa al-Arabi and Al Jazeera, have revealed that Salah Abedin is a prominent figure in another group, the Muslim Brotherhood's secret international women's organization, also known as the Muslim Sisterhood. The Ikhwan's website says, quote, the women's organization's goal, in accordance with the Muslim Brotherhood rules, is to gain and acquire a unified global perception in every nation in the world regarding the position of women and the necessity of advocacy work at all levels in accordance with the message of the Brotherhood as written in Women in Muslim Society and the rearing of women throughout the different stages of life, unquote. In other words, the Sisterhood's goal is to establish a Sharia-compliant role for women worldwide. Huma Abedin has another family member closely tied to the Muslim Brotherhood, her brother Dr. Hassan Abedin. He has been a fellow at an Oxford University institute with myriad ties to Islamists. For example, Abdullah Omar Nassif has served as chairman of the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies Board of Trustees, and Yusuf al-Qaradawi has been one of its members. OCIS has even presented an award for great scholarly achievement to Sheikh Abd al-Fattah Abu Ghouda, whose involvement with the Ikhwan dates back to his meeting with Hassan al-Banna in the 1940s. Huma Abedin reportedly met President and Mrs. Clinton during their visit to Saudi Arabia before Huma returned to the United States for college. She worked first as an intern and then as a paid staffer in the White House assigned to the First Lady's office. She was a senior advisor to Mrs. Clinton during her Senate tenure, and Abedin served as a traveling chief of staff to candidate Hillary Clinton during the 2008 presidential campaign. Huma Abedin's years of service to Hillary Clinton culminated in her appointment to the position of Deputy Chief of Staff for the Secretary of State when Mrs. Clinton joined the Obama administration in 2009. Secretary Clinton made a point of visiting Huma's mother at her university in Jeddah in 2011. On that occasion, she praised her aide and described her position as one that is, quote, very important and sensitive, unquote. That seems almost certainly to be the case, which raises a very important question. What impact does a key aide with close ties to the Muslim Brotherhood have on her boss's attitudes and decisions with respect to policy towards the Ikhwan and its fellow Islamists at a moment that is proven to be both very important and sensitive? Another individual exercising influence in Obama administration circles on matters involving Islam and Sharia is Dalia Mogahed. She came to the United States from her native Egypt at the age of 4 and took her undergraduate degree at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and her MBA at the University of Pittsburgh. Mogahed's day job is with the Gallup polling organization's Center for Muslim Studies, where she serves as both the executive director and a senior analyst. The center's stated mission is to provide, quote, nonpartisan and independent analysis that global leaders, institutions, and the public can use to make more informed decisions. In the fall of 2010, the Center for Muslim Studies opened a facility in Dubai. The Gallup brand for objective public polling has been seriously eroded, however, by Dalia Mogahed's involvement with and support for Islamist groups and causes. Dalia Mogahed has also been the director of a classic interfaith dialogue operation run as a joint venture between the Coexist Foundation and the Gallup organization. Its stated mission is to share, quote, findings of the Gallup World Poll with leaders in the Muslim world and the West, unquote. Recalling what we have learned about Sayyid Qutb's admonition that bridge building must be about bringing infidels to Islam, this version of the Coexist bumper sticker is a more accurate depiction of the object of the exercise. In September 2008, she defended two of the most important Muslim Brotherhood fronts in the United States, the Islamic Society of North America and the Council on American Islamic Relations. She contended that links between such groups and Islamic radicals were, quote, misinformation, unquote, and part of a groundless, quote, witch hunt aimed at silencing them. Further evidence of Dalia Mogahed's sympathies can be found in her appearance in May 2009 before the 34th Annual Conference of the Islamic Council of North America, an organization that has long promoted jihad and Sharia. The event was co-sponsored by the Muslim American Society, which was founded to serve as the Muslim Brotherhood's formal American branch. She's also been involved with the Muslim Public Affairs Council, an organization described as the Muslim Brotherhood's U.S. counterpart to the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. MPAC is a prime practitioner of various stealth jihadist techniques. These quotes illustrate Mogahed's activist approach to her surveys and the conclusions she draws from them about the world's Muslims and their practice of Islam. Studies by Gallup and other groups have repeatedly shown, quote, there is just no correlation between religiosity and violent extremism, unquote. And, quote, the majority of people in the Middle East believe in principles of free speech, free press, and a representative government, unquote.
Such representations call into question her impartiality and the reliability of her findings.
This quote succinctly captures the essence of the Muslim Brotherhood's civilization in America. Give them what they want in response to nonviolent coercion, and maybe you can avoid the violent forms.
In a 2009 interview with the terrorist sympathizing group Hizb ut-Tahrir, Dalia Mogahed revealed unmistakably her pro-Sharia attitude and raised further questions about her data and objectivity with respect to Islamism. Quote, "I think the reason so many women support Sharia is because they have a very different understanding of Sharia than the common perception in Western media," unquote. And, quote, "The majority of women around the world associate gender justice, or justice for women, with Sharia compliance," unquote.
A collaboration between Dalia Mogahed and her mentor, Al-Walid bin Talal's representative at Georgetown University, John Esposito, resulted in Who Speaks for Islam? A blurb from Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, Zbigniew Brzezinski, is instructive about the partisan quality of Mogahed's work. Quote, "This book helps readers understand who does not speak for Islam, contrary to the broad-brush demagogy used by Bush administration spokesmen to justify a wide-ranging World War IV with the world of Islam," unquote.
The data underpinning this book have been challenged on several grounds. For example, renowned scholar of Islam and Jihad Robert Spencer says the authors, quote, "cooked their data to increase the number of Muslim moderates, counting as moderate Muslims who wanted Sharia rule, hated America, supported jihad martyrdom, suicide bombing, and opposed equality of rights for women," unquote. A particularly egregious example of Mogahed's cooking the data is evident in this quote, in which she maintained that more Americans support targeting civilians than is the case in Muslim nations where Sharia is the law of the land. The only plausible explanation for the low numbers attributed to Muslim nations' support for killing civilians is that the term is defined very differently in Sharia-adherent nations like Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Hezbollah-run Lebanon. Specifically, only innocent Muslims are considered inviolate civilians, and even then, only if their death is not required to advance the interests of Islam. Non-combatant infidels, even women and children, are considered to be fair game for jihadists. Such questionable professional conduct makes all the more troubling the influence Mogahed is exercising in the Obama administration. She takes credit, for example, for having shaped U.S. policy toward the Middle East. And others agree she has extraordinary clout in the White House. That's due in part to the fact that Mogahed was formally appointed in 2009 as an advisor to President Obama. Mogahed is also involved with the Department of Homeland Security Working Group on countering violent extremism, about which we will have much more to say shortly. Finally, in a February 18, 2012 news item, the Wall Street Journal reported on a Muslim Brotherhood, quote, charm offensive, unquote, aimed at securing Western funding and investment in Egypt, despite the Ikhwan's virulent hostility towards non-Muslims and their capitalist system. Dalia Mogahed is quoted to the effect that a majority of Egyptians spurn Sharia in favor of economic development. Such polling data are clearly helpful to the Ikhwan's and the Obama administration's efforts to secure further U.S. foreign aid for Egypt, despite its new hostile power structure and policy direction. Dalia Mogahed's true colors are further evidenced by statements reflecting her hostility towards Israel. In a tweet sent on March 10, 2012, she declared, quote, "To those siding with Assad, he cannot deliver stability, protection of minorities, or resistance to Israel. He is a killer without legitimacy," unquote. Jihad Watch's director, Sharia expert Robert Spencer observed, Mogahed ignores the fact that Damascus was headquarters for Hamas and other jihad organizations, and Assad pursued a course of consistent hostility to Israel, but not hostile enough for Obama advisor Dalia Mogahed, unquote. It seems clear that a woman with Dalia Mogahed's skill set and proclivities should not be influencing U.S. policy towards the Muslim Brotherhood in the Middle East
let alone inside the United States. Chicago is a hotbed of radical Islamists. One of their leaders is Sheikh Kifa Mustafa, a Sunni Muslim of Palestinian extraction who hails from Lebanon, but is now based in the Chicago area. Mustafa is the driving force behind 3 Sharia-adherent entities in the area. He serves as the imam of a mosque in Bridgeview, the chairman of the Chicago Imams Council, and the founder of the Mosque Foundation. Kifa Mustafa was described by his friends at the Chicago branch of the Council on American Islamic Relations as, quote, an upstanding citizen who has served this country and its community time and again, unquote. Actually, Kifa Mustafa is a supporter of jihad. He admitted to serving as the registered agent for Illinois of a convicted terrorism financing operation, the Holy Land Foundation. According to court records, he earned over $154,000 from the foundation between 1996 and 2000. Mustafa was, like the Council on American Islamic Relations, listed as an unindicted co-conspirator in the trial of that Hamas fundraising front. He also admitted to being tied to a number of other Muslim Brotherhood Hamas organizations, including the Islamic Association for Palestine, the precursor to CARE. According to counterterrorism expert Patrick Poole, quote, in the course of the Holy Land Foundation trial, FBI Special Agent Laura Burns testified that Mustafa also sang in a band sponsored by the Holy Land Foundation that regularly featured songs dedicated to killing Jews and glorifying Hamas, unquote. Among the lyrics of one such song was a line saying, quote, I am a member of Hamas, unquote. Mustafa arranged material support for Hamas, as captured in this 2009 photo. He's shown on the eve of America's Independence Day, sponsoring a fundraising event at his Mosque Foundation.
The guest of honor was George Galloway, a former British Member of Parliament infamous for his hostility towards America and Israel, and for his sympathy for Arab and Islamist causes. The Mosque Foundation newsletter of July 28, 2011 makes clear that Galloway was seeking support to take, quote, food, medicine, and other supplies into war-ravaged Gaza, unquote. It also reports that, quote, through their generous financial contributions and prayers, the Mosque Foundation shares in this humanitarian expedition, unquote, and that, quote, many members of this community successfully entered Gaza on July 14th, unquote.
Incredibly, notwithstanding Mustafa's designation as an unindicted co-conspirator in the largest terrorism financing trial in U.S. history, and his well-documented ties to assorted jihadist groups, he was selected and trained to serve as the first Muslim chaplain in the history of the Illinois State Police. The Illinois State Police are said to have done a, quote, thorough background check, unquote, on Mustafa. But as we have seen with Suhail Khan's clearance, the security vetting process has become seriously dysfunctional. Upon learning of Mustafa's appointment, terrorism expert Stephen Emerson published a damning recitation of the imam's myriad ties to jihad, including, as Chicago television station WLS put it in an investigative report, quote, Justice Department documents that cite Mustafa as a member of the Muslim Brotherhood's Palestine Committee, an organization that federal prosecutors say raises money for Hamas and is committed to the globalization of Islam and violent jihad, unquote. In the wake of these disclosures, the Illinois State Police revoked Mustafa's appointment. CARE sued on Kifa Mustafa's behalf, seeking his reinstatement. According to court documents in the case, Robert Grant, the special agent in charge of the Chicago office of the FBI, repeatedly warned Illinois State Police officials that, quote, Mustafa would not pass an FBI background check to be a chaplain for the FBI. This 6-week program afforded Mustafa an extraordinary opportunity to learn firsthand about FBI and other government counterterrorism techniques, including in the course of visits to not only the super-secret Counterterrorism Center, but to FBI headquarters and the FBI Training Academy at Quantico. Such exposure is actually advertised in the FBI's description of the Citizens Academy. It reads in part, quote, because of the classified investigative techniques discussed, nominees for the Academy must undergo a background check and get an interim security clearance." Unquote. Just how fully Kifa Mustafa exploited his chance to collect useful intelligence about U.S. counterterrorism tradecraft was illuminated by Ben Bradley, a journalist who also participated in the Citizens Academy and accompanied Mustafa on the tour of these sensitive sites. Bradley is a reporter with WLS-TV in Chicago, ironically, the same news organization that investigated the imam after the Illinois State Police revoked his appointment. Here's how Ben Bradley described Mustafa's conduct in the course of the program. Quote, "Mustafa asked some of the most pointed questions during the 6-week FBI Citizens Academy and trip to Washington. He pushed agents to fully explain everything, from the Bureau's use of deadly force policy to racial and ethnic profiling. Mustafa said, quote, "I saw a very interesting side of what the FBI does, and I wanted to know more." Unquote. In short, Kifa Mustafa took full advantage of the opportunities he was granted to collect useful intelligence. When terrorism expert and BigPiece.com contributor Patrick Poole, a member of Team B2, broke the story of Mustafa's visits to some of our government's most sensitive facilities, the FBI was furious. At first, its spokesman insisted that the group picture at the NCTC was a fabrication. It soon came to light, however, that it was actually an official FBI photo. Then, FBI Chicago spokesman Ross Rice insisted to the Washington Times' Bill Gertz that while Mustafa was indeed a Holy Land Foundation unindicted co-conspirator, his participation in the Citizen Academy was unobjectionable since he, quote, "had never been convicted of a crime and never charged with a crime," unquote. Rice added, quote, "If we thought he was a security risk, we wouldn't have included him," unquote, in the Citizens Academy. In fact, there was ample basis for excluding Kifa Mustafa from the Citizens Academy and its sensitive tour. And the fact that this imam was allowed to participate in it is but one more example of the security environment, or more accurately, the insecurity environment created by the Obama administration based on Bush administration precedents and practices. Mohammed El-Biari is a particularly skilled practitioner of the Muslim Brotherhood's civilization jihad. His base of operations is an organization he founded in Dallas, Texas, the Freedom and Justice Foundation. It turns out that freedom and justice are terms favored by the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, too. The names are not the only things El-Biari's organization has in common with the Ikhwan's operations elsewhere. It is also involved in several of the civilization jihadists' priority initiatives, including interfaith community relations and government influence operations. As is typical of Muslim Brotherhood-associated operatives, El-Biari affects a public persona of moderation and of rejection of violent jihadism and its supremacist goals. Yet, a review of his numerous op-ed articles and statements reveals a pattern of affinity for the Ikhwan critique of U.S. policies, judicial decisions, and counterterrorism practices that have impeded the Brotherhood's agenda. It is replete with examples of taqiyya, purposeful dissembling to confuse infidels for the purpose of protecting Islam or otherwise advancing its interests. For instance, El-Biari was a headliner for a 2004 event in Irving, Texas, marking the anniversary of the birth of the rabidly anti-American Iranian theocratic revolutionary, Ayatollah Khomeini. When challenged about his appearance, El-Biari penned an op-ed in the Dallas Morning News in which he professed to be ignorant about both the nature of the tribute and the Ayatollah's political purposes beyond what El-Biari considered his admirable pursuit of, quote, Muslim unity, unquote. He also claimed to, quote, have never been associated with any form of radicalism, unquote. Another example of Mohammed El-Biari's taqiyya can be found in a heated exchange he had with a critic of Islamism over the nature of Sayyid Qutb's ideology. As the bipartisan 9/11 Commission made clear, the influential Qutb's writings explicitly call for all Muslims to take up arms when the milestones of jihad have created conditions in which violence will lead to success. The commissioners observed that, according to Qutb, quote, any Muslim who rejects his ideas is just one more non-believer worthy of destruction, unquote. El-Biari has also run interference for Islamists and their agendas. Notably, he wrote an op-ed in the Dallas Morning News that opposed the prospect of the assassination of Anwar al-Awlaki, in part by mischaracterizing his role in inspiring jihad. El-Biari has also followed the Ikhwan line in opposing efforts to restrict material support for terrorism. El-Biari's expertise is favorably cited by the red-green operation known as Charity and Security Network, which was substantially underwritten by George Soros's OMB Watch and with which, as we saw in Part 4 of this course, Islamists like Suhail Khan are associated. While one might have thought such positions and activism would have amounted to red flags for security-minded professionals, a succession of them have appointed El-Biari to positions with such organizations as the Texas Department of Public Safety and the National Counterterrorism Center Global Engagement Group to advise on Homeland Security-related matters. Notably, El-Biari currently serves on the Texas Department of Public Safety Advisory Board. Worse yet, in October 2010, El-Biari was appointed to the Department of Homeland Security's Advisory Council. He also became a member of the Council's Countering Violent Extremism Working Group. We'll discuss in the next part of this course the role these organizations have played in shaping Obama administration policies. According to yet another path-breaking article by Patrick Poole, El-Biari was given a security clearance in the fall of 2011. Reportedly, he promptly set about abusing the access he was afforded at the direction of DHS headquarters to the department's classified state and local intelligence community of interest, or SLIC, system. According to counterterrorism expert Poole, on October 21, 2011, within hours of gaining access to the SLIC system, Mohammed El-Biari mined it to obtain Texas Department of Public Safety reports marked for official use only. It turns out he approached a news outlet with these documents seeking to discredit Governor Rick Perry as being hostile to Muslims. The publication evidently found the evidence unpersuasive. The story of El-Biari's misconduct was broken by Poole on October 26th in Piche Media. On the day Poole's story broke, Representative Louis Gohmert of Texas used the occasion of DHS Secretary Napolitano's appearance before the House Judiciary Committee to grill her on El-Biari's actions, of which she said she had no knowledge. Pledges to do an inquiry into the matter and report back to the committee have thus far gone unfulfilled. Perhaps nothing has come of the request for an investigation of Mohammed El-Biari's certainly improper and possibly illegal activities because in the previous month, El-Biari was personally recognized for his service to the FBI and to the law enforcement community more generally by the Bureau's director, Robert Mueller. It's not clear what, quote, extraordinary contributions, unquote, El-Biari made to, quote, specific cases, unquote, and what, if anything, was the upshot of such help. As to the relationships he helped the FBI expand with the Muslim community in Texas, in the hands of Islamist operatives like El-Biari, the result is usually counterproductive, as it generally involves the dumbing down of law enforcement's situational awareness and effective action against civilization jihadists in this country. The award ceremony was held at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. A series of ominous events followed Mohammed El-Biari's visit to Quantico. It strains credulity that they were all coincidental. Within 6 days, the online magazine Wired published a harsh critique of the training provided to those charged with what is euphemistically known as countering violent extremism. The author was a virulently anti-American leftist, Spencer Ackerman. 4 days later, El-Biari responds admiringly to the Ackerman attack on the trainers at the Muslim Matters website. In that article, El-Biari explicitly acknowledges being involved in sharing unspecified research with like-minded individuals inside the FBI and Homeland Security intelligence enterprise. El-Biari also took credit, at least implicitly, for getting one of America's preeminent non-Muslim authorities on Sharia and jihad, Stephen Coughlin, quote, terminated, unquote. El-Biari declared that, quote, I believe as Coughlin's career was ended, so will FBI trainer William Gothrop's and other less infamous full-time analysts inside the national security enterprise. 2 days later, Spencer Ackerman responds with a tribute to Elibiari. And on the 23rd of September, Ackerman published one more screed about the Islamophobic documents in the FBI library, together with photos of such material. The photos were taken on a cell phone from inside the library. On October 4th, a red-green coalition, including the American Civil Liberties Union and Muslim Brotherhood fronts like CARE, wrote FBI Director Mueller insisting that the FBI's training program be overhauled to eliminate materials that are Islamophobic or that otherwise offend Muslims. Interestingly, Spencer Ackerman's wife works at the American Civil Liberties Union. In short, Mohammed Elibiari appears to have been in a position to generate a campaign aimed at extending the Islamists' information dominance by terminating or silencing those knowledgeable about Sharia and civilization jihad and responsible for vital training at the FBI, among other federal, state, and local agencies. We'll examine in the next part of this course how he and others have used such opportunities for influence operations to devastating effect on our situational awareness about this threat doctrine, and what it obliges its adherents to do in the way of making the rest of us feel subdued. Imam Muhammad Majid, also known as Muhammad Haq Majid, has already been mentioned several times earlier in this course. Let's examine a little more closely the man, his ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, and his influence operations in the United States. Muhammad Majid comes from pedigreed Islamist stock. His father has been described as a, quote, Cairo-trained Muslim Brotherhood scholar, unquote, who has served as the top cleric in one of the most Sharia-adherent nations in the world, the Republic of Sudan. The website of the Al-Madina Institute, which lists the younger Majid as one of its teachers, says he, quote, studied at the hands of his father, unquote. Majid previously ran the Islamic Center of Washington, prominently located on the city's exclusive Embassy Row. Recall this center was the venue chosen for President George W. Bush's Muslim outreach event with CARE's Niad Awad, the Islamic Institute's Khalid Safuri, and other Islamists shortly after 9/11. Majid relocated to the Adams Center in Sterling, Virginia. This 25,000-square-foot facility, which describes itself as one of the largest in the Washington, D.C. region and the country, has 7 branches throughout the northern Virginia region. Despite his Islamist family, upbringing, and devout adherence to Sharia, Muhammad Majid has proven to be a most adept practitioner of the Muslim Brotherhood's civilization jihadist techniques. We've discussed how that tradecraft requires a brother to be, as one law enforcement professional puts it, quote, the nicest guy in the room, unquote. He smoothly practices taqiyya to foster an image of reasonableness, tolerance, and moderation. For the benefit of non-Muslims, he emphasizes practice of his faith that seems modern, tolerant, and consistent with American values. In its November 14, 2005 edition, Time magazine played the role intended for it and others in the media in the Muslim Brotherhood's stealth jihad, obscuring Islamists' true agenda and suppressing their critics. The profile by Douglas Waller drew on 2 weeks of clearly, carefully managed exposure to Majid and reflects the full effects of a first-class influence operation. Majid's Adams Center in Sterling, Virginia, is a key institution in what has come to be known as the Wahhabi Corridor, due to its concentration of Sharia-observing and promoting organizations, mosques, and communities. Paul Sperry, a highly regarded investigative reporter and best-selling author on the penetration of America by Islamists, has described the Adams Center as, quote, the second most dangerous mosque in America, unquote, being bested only by another of the Wahhabi Corridor's facilities, Anwar al-Awlaki's Dar al-Hijra in nearby Falls Church, Virginia. As we noted at the outset of this course, much that would be instructive about Muhammad Majid's activities and other Muslim Brotherhood operations is not publicly available at the moment. What is in the public domain, however, is ample to establish that Majid's so-called moderation is completely consistent with the Ikhwan doctrine for deferring the use of violence in nations like the United States until other jihadist techniques have created conditions where it is likely to succeed in subduing all opposition to Sharia's imposition. In fact, he is today one of the more accomplished practitioners of these sorts of stealthy means of advancing that goal. Other data helps reinforce this more accurate assessment of Muhammad Majid and his agenda. For instance, around the time of 9/11, a veritable beehive of Muslim Brotherhood-affiliated organizations operated behind the nondescript facades of 2 office buildings in Herndon, Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C. Federal affidavits state that the Grove Street addresses housed more than 100 interlocking Muslim organizations. What interlocked most of them was an entity known as the Safa Group, and funding provided substantially by one individual, a wealthy Saudi Islamist named Suleiman Abdul Aziz al-Raj. Al-Raj's initials gave rise to the name of his funding vehicle, the SAR Foundation. The president of the Safa conglomerate was Jamal al-Barzinji. Senior Special Agent David Kane of the Bureau of Immigration and Customs Enforcement asserted in a sworn affidavit that there was no innocent explanation, quote, for the use of layers and layers of transactions between Safa Group companies and charities other than to throw law enforcement authorities off the trail, unquote. He added that the Safa Group was, quote, set up primarily with donations from a wealthy Saudi family, unquote, and its purpose, quote, was to fund terrorism and hide millions of dollars, unquote. Kane observed that the complex nature of the, quote, myriad financial transactions and the fact that much of the money was sent to tax havens with bank secrecy laws make it impossible to trace the final destination of much of the money, unquote. No fewer than 11 individuals associated with Majid's Adams Center were identified by federal authorities on a list of officers and directors of the Safa Group. Importantly, one of those listed in the government's affidavit about the officers and directors of the Safa Group was Ahmed Totonji. In the 2002 timeframe, Totonji was both a vice president of the Safa Group and chairman of the board of Majid's mosque complex. Totonji happened to be a vice president of another entity listed in the Muslim Brotherhood's explanatory memorandum as one of its organizations, the International Institute for Islamic Thought, IIIT, a group that has also been tied to Al-Qaeda. On March 20, 2002, the 2 Grove Street buildings were among those raided as part of an investigation led by the U.S. Customs Service and known as Operation Green Quest, which has been called, quote, the largest U.S. terror finance investigation anywhere in the world, unquote. According to a federal affidavit, Green Quest's targets were, quote, suspected of providing material support to terrorists, money laundering, and tax evasion through the use of a variety of for-profit companies and ostensible charitable entities under their control, unquote. Barzinji, Totonji, and scores of others were focuses of this investigation, as was the Adams Center 500 Grove Street facility, which sublet space from the Ikhwan's International Institute for Islamic Thought. As it happened, Mohammed Majid was actually in the Adams Grove Street office when federal agents raided it. Investigators are said to have seized some 500 banker boxes of documents and other evidence in the course of the raid on it and other offices. Unfortunately, turf fights between the Bureau of Immigration and Customs Enforcement and the FBI resulted in May 2003 in an agreement that shut down Operation Green Quest. Attorney General John Ashcroft and Secretary of Homeland Security Tom Ridge pledged that going forward, the FBI would serve on behalf of the Department of Justice as the lead agency in such investigations, and that its permission would have to be obtained before any new ones could be initiated. One reason why the FBI pulled the plug on Operation Green Quest might have been concern about its friend Mohammed Majid. After all, as Time reported in its November 2005 puff piece, Majid had a cooperative relationship with the FBI for which he actually received an award from the Bureau. Time seems to have taken this collaboration as proof positive of the Imam's moderation. As Time put it, quote, for Majid, that has meant not only condemning terrorism, but also working closely with the FBI in battling it. He regularly opens doors for agents trying to cultivate contacts in his Muslim community, and he alerts the Bureau when suspicious persons approach his congregation, unquote. The magazine added, quote, Majid regularly tips off the Bureau when a stranger with a questionable background wanders into his center, unquote. In response to the Time profile's publication and its characterization of him as what amounts to an FBI snitch, Majid issued an open letter to his congregation. It flatly contradicted the idea that his involvement with the Bureau was anything other than what, in fact, it is, a vehicle for waging civilization jihad including the employing of taqiyya for the purpose of subversion. He wrote that, quote, "The nature of my relationship with the FBI and law enforcement is that I meet monthly as a member of a collaborative effort by a number of Muslim American organizations that advocate mutual respect and rights in dealing with federal law enforcement agencies. I often convey to the FBI that our Muslim community needs to be treated as partners, not as suspects," unquote. Majid added, quote, "Our advisory committee does not use these monthly meetings to report on the activities of our community members, as the purpose of the meetings are solely to create avenues to work with law enforcement to preserve our civil liberties and civil rights," unquote. The FBI's trusted interlocutor, Mohammed Majid, is not only the leader of one of the most dangerous Islamist mosques in America, and a man who admits to playing what amounts to a double game with the Bureau, pretending to cooperate, but really using his access to promote a subversive Ikhwan agenda aimed at destroying Western civilization from within by our hands. In addition, as it happens, after 2 terms as Vice President of the Islamic Society of North America, Mohammed Majid became, in September 2010, the organization's president. To recap what we've learned about ISNA thus far, it topped the roster attached to the Ikhwan's 1991 explanatory memorandum on the strategic goals of the group, under the heading, quote, "A list of our organizations and organizations of our friends." ISNA was identified by the prosecution in the 2008 Holy Land Foundation trial as an unindicted co-conspirator, a designation that was upheld by 4 federal judges on the basis of the evidence produced by the government, including the explanatory memorandum. On December 22, 2003, Senate Finance Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley and Ranking Member Max Baucus wrote the Director of the Internal Revenue Service seeking detailed information about the Islamic Society of North America and 24 other Muslim American organizations that, quote, "finance terrorism and perpetuate violence," unquote. The senators subsequently concluded that what law enforcement was doing to investigate these groups was sufficient. A pronouncement ISNA and others listed portrayed as a complete exoneration. The Finance Committee took the unusual step of issuing a statement in response that said, in part, quote, "The fact that the committee has taken no public action based on the review of these documents does not mean that these groups have been cleared," unquote. While the committee said it would continue to monitor this portfolio, like Operation GreenQuest, it seems effectively to have been terminated before it could do any real damage to the targets of its investigation. As will be discussed in Part 9 of this course, on February 8, 2012, the FBI further legitimated the Islamic Society of North America and its Islamist friends. On that date, Director Robert Mueller capitulated to demands by Mohammed Majid's ISNA and other Muslim Brotherhood fronts that, pursuant to Spencer Ackerman's reporting, the Bureau's files be reviewed for documents and briefing materials that these groups would deem offensive. He told his interlocutors, that included Majid, that 700 such documents and 300 briefings had been purged. True to form, the Muslim Brothers responded to such submission by demanding more. In a joint statement, the group said that they had, quote, "suggested that a committee of community leaders and experts be assembled to review training material issued by the FBI. Meeting participants requested that the training process be open and transparent moving forward and requested future meetings with Director Mueller to continue the conversation," unquote. Actually, any such future meetings with ISNA, and indeed the one held on February 8, 2012, would defy the express will of Congress. At the initiative of Representative Frank Wolf of Virginia, the sole Republican to date formally to denounce Grover Norquist's Islamist influence operations, the statement of managers accompanying the Consolidated and Further Continuing Appropriations Act of 2012, signed into law by President Obama on November 18, 2011, reads as follows, quote, "Liaison Partnerships. The conferees support the FBI's policy prohibiting any formal, non-investigative cooperation with unindicted co-conspirators in terrorism cases. The conferees expect the FBI to insist on full compliance with this policy by FBI field offices and to report to the Committees on Appropriations regarding any violation of the policy," unquote. Regrettably, the FBI is not the only federal agency that has embraced Mohammed Majid. in some cases literally. Here are a very few, but highly illustrative examples of Majid's success in penetrating other parts of the Obama administration. The FBI's chain of command at the Justice Department has made Mohammed Majid, his Adams Center, and ISNA mainstays of its Muslim outreach efforts. The Attorney General has met with Majid and other Islamists at least once, something his predecessor Alberto Gonzales declined to do after ISNA was named an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation trial. And General Holder's assistant for civil rights, Thomas Perez, actually hugged Majid on stage at an event in Washington in October 2011. More importantly, as we will discuss in Part 9, Perez has used his office to intervene on behalf of Muslims claiming victimhood at the hands of racists and Islamophobes. At the same October 2011 event held at George Washington University, further fruit was harvested in the Elibiari Ackerman Majid effort to neuter U.S. training for combating violent extremism. Deputy Attorney General James Cole declared, quote, "I recently directed all components of the Department of Justice to reevaluate their training efforts," unquote. U.S. Attorney Dwight Holton of Oregon added that there would be a complete ban on FBI training materials that link Islam to violence in any way. He said, quote, "I want to be perfectly clear about this. Training materials that portray Islam as a religion of violence or with a tendency towards violence are wrong. They are offensive, and they are contrary to everything this President, this Attorney General, and Department of Justice stand for. They will not be tolerated," unquote. One of the countless examples of the Department of Defense's outreach to, and thereby legitimization of, the wrong sorts of Muslims occurred on February 24th when Peter Lavoie, the acting Assistant Secretary of Defense for Asia and Pacific Affairs, followed up on a meeting at the Pentagon with Mohammed Majid the day before. Lavoie appeared at Friday services at the Adams Center to apologize on behalf of the Pentagon and the United States government for the unintentional burning in Afghanistan of Qurans that had been defaced by Islamist detainees. As Majid put it afterwards, quote, "It was very satisfying, very heartwarming to hear an apology 3 times in one speech," unquote. Mohammed Majid also attended what has been described as an intimate iftar dinner hosted by the U.S. Department of Treasury in August 2010. One of his colleagues subsequently crowed that, quote, "ISNA representatives were given a very open platform to discuss our concerns," unquote. Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner got an earful about the Muslim Brotherhood's priority of easing restrictions on material support for terrorism in the name of, quote, "ending impediments to zakat," unquote, something that, as we have seen, President Obama had promised to do during his first Muslim outreach speech in Cairo in June 2009. As we have previously seen, Mohammed Majid was included among the dignitaries invited to attend the address President Obama gave at the State Department on May 19, 2011. This is but one indication of the access he enjoys at senior levels in Foggy Bottom. In addition, under Secretary Janet Napolitano, Mohammed Majid was appointed to the Department of Homeland Security's Countering Violent Extremism Working Group. Given his presence on this panel, among other Islamists, including Dalia Mogahed, it should come as no surprise that in April 2010 the working group produced a report that reads like it was taken straight out of the Muslim Brotherhood's Civilization Jihad playbook. It said, in part, quote, "While acknowledging that information-driven, community-based law enforcement efforts hold great promise in preventing violent crime that is terrorism-related, that promise will be best realized when local authorities work with community members to understand and mitigate all threats facing local communities," unquote. In other words, Homeland defenders should rely on community members, read Islamists who are, like Majid, self-declared leaders of the community, rather than rely on intelligence-driven policing. We will discuss this working group's ominous impact on policy momentarily. In March 2011, anticipating that the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, Representative Peter King of New York, would use then upcoming hearings into radicalization in the Muslim community to flay the Obama administration's outreach to the Brotherhood, Deputy National Security Advisor Dennis McDonough made the trip to the Adams Center and used the occasion to lavish praise on its imam, He said, in part, "Thank you, Muhammad, for being one of the leading voices for the values that make America so strong, especially religious freedom and tolerance. Whether it's here at Adams or as the president of the Islamic Society of North America, you've spoken with passion and eloquence, not only about your own Islamic faith, but for the need to build bridges, as you've demonstrated here." Unquote. In sum, all 6 of these individuals have 2 things in common. First, they share an unmistakable connection to the supremacist Islamic doctrine of Sharia and the preeminent organization promoting its insinuation into this country, the Muslim Brotherhood. And second, they've achieved, to varying degrees, considerable success in gaining access to and influence with the administration of Barack Obama. Unfortunately, these are not the only examples of such penetrations. Others are hiding in plain sight and warrant the sort of critical attention long overdue with respect to this cohort. Even taking into account the openings and precedents created by the Al-Amoudi-Norquist network during the previous administration, it's hard to imagine that the sorts of inroads made by Muslim Brotherhood operatives discussed in this part of the course and the next one could have happened without the assent of the president himself. A deep drill down on his background and proclivities is beyond the scope of this course. Reference materials available at www.securefreedom.org, however, provide a wealth of data and insights into such factors for those interested in exploring them further. Suffice it to say, for the present purpose, that those factors have greatly compounded the danger posed by the Muslim Brotherhood and others engaged in the civilization jihad against America.
Even taking into account the openings and precedents created by the Al-Amoudi-Norquist network during the previous administration, it's hard to imagine that the sorts of inroads made by Muslim Brotherhood operatives discussed in this part of the course and the next one could have happened without the assent of the president himself. A deep drill down on Barack Obama's background and proclivities is simply beyond the scope of this course. Reference materials available at MuslimBrotherhoodinAmerica.org, however, provide a wealth of data and insights into such factors for those interested in exploring them further. And Part 9 will develop the ways in which the Obama administration is transforming America and its policies at home and abroad in ways favored by its Islamist friends. Suffice it to say for the moment that President Barack Hussein Obama's personal history and predilections have greatly compounded the danger posed by the Muslim Brotherhood and others engaged in the civilization jihad against America.
An image and a quote, however, convey a sense of the magnitude of the president's own attitudes that are contributing so dramatically to the policies his administration is pursuing, largely to the delight of the Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamists, and to the grave detriment of the United States' security and vital interests. These are the subject of Part 9.